Hello and welcome back to the StoreHero podcast. This week I'm joined by Ian Madigan, Head of Sales at Dataships. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thanks a million for having me on. Bumped into each other lots on the circuit, so great to be on the podcast.
I think that this one has been in the pipeline a bit of a while at this stage, but it'd be great to get a bit of an understanding, Ian, who you are, what do you do, and give us a little bit more information, I suppose, on what you guys do at Dataships.
Yeah, so I'm Ian Madigan. I'm the head of sales in Dataships. So we're a marketing compliance company. In essence, what we're trying to do is increase the number of customers our clients can market to. And we do that by presenting the most optimal data privacy wording at the checkout. And we're looking to increase that marketing consent rate. And then we track the contacts that we unlock. We want to see how many repeat purchases are coming from those contacts, and we attribute a revenue figure to those. So it's quite niche, works particularly well for businesses that are selling internationally. But for businesses that are solely selling into Ireland or the UK, it works really well, where we can rely on certain rules like soft opt-in. And we're trying to make an area of Shopify that isn't particularly efficient in that they just give two options. We're trying to present multiple options through our knowledge of the data privacy laws.
Yeah, and that's such an interesting point because it sounds like, Shopify do make it quite complex and there is only, as you said, one or two options. But I mean, I've seen the tool in operation before, and it's almost like putting a fire under your Klaviyo subscription numbers and your SMS numbers. You can install Dataships, you're fully compliant. And from what I've seen in some of the stories that we've chatted about before is that consent rate, that ability to just drive that infinite number of Klaviyo subscribers that you have, both for SMS and email, through the roof compared to what you would have had before. And I suppose one interesting thing that we're seeing, even a lot of brands that we're coming across from a StoreHero perspective at the moment they're often running even just lead gen tools through Facebook ads solely for the purpose of driving extra email subscribers. And when I see tools like Dataships out there, like this looks like it's much, much more of a cost-effective way to really drive that kind of email subscriber rate through the roof. Have you guys kind of come across any interesting stats in the last 12 months, even 18 months to a certain extent? Like how much does it cost brands on average to even get an email subscriber? Do you have numbers on that?
Yeah, I suppose there's different ways of capturing emails. There's different cost. And then what's important to brands is how those emails are converting. So for example, a newsletter pop up at the start of a website journey where maybe a brand is offering a 10% discount to input your email. That is actually quite expensive, because if your average order value is $100, you're giving a 10% discount. Technically, that email is costing you $10 to acquire. Now, it may be helping convert with the sale, but it's still an expensive way of getting that email address. Another way that we see brands typically doing it is, a competition. So maybe $1,000 voucher giveaway, or a hamper of goods worth 1,000. Like typically people who are giving their email addresses, they're giving it because they want to win the competition. They're not giving it because they want to hear from the brand. And what we see is those emails convert particularly poorly. And, you might get 100 emails. Again, it's probably going to land around $10, depending on how good the giveaway is. But whether you get 100 emails from a competition giveaway or 1,000 emails, they don't convert particularly well. What's, I suppose, different with what we're doing at Dataships is because we're capturing through the course of a purchase. It's a person who's invested in the brand, probably expecting to hear from the brand. Hopefully the products are good and they like it and they're getting targeted in the right way. They're going to come back and they're going to repeat purchase. The typical cost for acquiring an email through the checkout with Dataships is less than $1. So it's cost effective, and typically they're the most engaged people. We don't see a whole lot anymore of email lists being bought. I think that's probably one of the things the GDPR has improved. I also think the reason why we don't see it is because, if you just purchase a list of emails, typically they won't convert. They'll go straight to spam. They'll affect your score. And I think that's more a thing of the past now.
Interesting. So you guys, you're not capturing any of the emails that you guys are capturing, additional emails that maybe the brand wouldn't have captured otherwise. They're all of people who have actually purchased. They're not just people who, as you said, who are entering to win a competition, who are trying to get a discount code. They're only of people who are purchasing. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, if for example, you have 1,000 customers, coming through your checkout, you might have 200 of them might sign up through the newsletter pop-up for the discount. You might have had people who have purchased already and opted in for email marketing. And then as you come through the Dataships widget at the checkout, typically our average of customers that opt in for email marketing is 88%. So you might have, for example, an additional 600 customers that haven't opted in yet. And then they come through the Dataships widget and we convert maybe 500 of those remaining 600 customers. Without Dataships, the brand may have converted maybe typically we would see for an untick box, we would see a conversion rate of 22%. For a pre-tick box, which is compliant in the States and Canada, we would see a market consent rate of 44%. So we would at least be doubling the number of customers that haven't opted in at that point. And then it's only that cohort that we're looking to track. It's not customers that have previously subscribed to emails that we're looking to track to see if they've made repeat purchases. It's only those that are new to the client's Klaviyo account as marketable.
Okay, interesting. So you're telling me for the majority of brands, we'll say in the EU, ballpark, only 20% to 22% of customers are actually opting into that email newsletter at checkout.
At checkout, yeah. Yeah. Now you will
Wow.
get, and additional to that, you'll get a percentage that are opting in through the newsletter, depending on the discount. If it's a pet food brand, typically we'll see them offering, a 25% discount to sign up to the newsletter because they know when a customer purchases, they're likely to come back and repurchase maybe 8 or 9 times in the year. If it's a toy company, for example, you might see a newsletter pop-up discount of 5% because the likelihood of them coming back multiple times is low. For toys, home and garden, typically you're going to see repeat purchases maybe once or twice in a year.
Okay, really interesting. So if you guys, so ballpark, sorry, the average opt-in rate is 22%. And what are you guys saying the kind of average once a brand would install Dataships would get that up to?
So if a brand was selling solely in Ireland, we would because we can rely on soft opt-in that converts at just over 80%. Same with the UK. For the states in Canada, it's we can rely on implied consent in Canada and no consent required in the States. Where what that means is by purchasing in the States and Canada, a customer is effectively opting in for email marketing. You just have to present the marketing preferences, privacy policy. In Canada, you have to keep audit logs on those customers. But that converts at 95%, the 5% being people who are on a self-exclusion list or have already unsubscribed. Now they can still obviously unsubscribe by clicking on the email. So across, and then the stricter countries in the world, like the likes of Germany, Brazil, where you have to do double opt-in, where the customer has to actively tick the box to opt in. Then they have to be sent an email asking them to double opt-in, where they would have to opt in for a second time, and then you can start sending marketing content. That configuration alone converts at 11%. It's really poor. With a brand, let's say an Irish brand that's selling into the UK, Germany, and the States, we will just ensure compliance with the German customers by presenting the most, compliant wording. But then we will get significant growth in those other countries, the likes of the UK and the States.
Interesting. Does Shopify not do that for you automatically? Like if you are an Irish brand or a UK brand and you are selling into Ireland, Germany, and the States, like you just said, would Shopify not do that for you automatically, or are you liable for that yourself as a brand owner and making sure that you're compliant there?
Yeah, Shopify give you, 2 options. So they give you an untick box, which is compliant all across the world, and that converts around 22%. And then they allow you to also use a pre-tick box. The reason for that is it's fully compliant in the States and Canada. It's non-compliant in Ireland, the UK, and pretty much across Europe. You can optimize your checkout that it would change. For example, if you were selling into the UK and the States, that it will present an untick box in the UK and a pre-tick box in the States. It is on the brand to ensure that they're being compliant. They're giving you the options of what to use, but they're not taking responsibility for what is used. What I'd say about that option is we would still be able to get a significant uplift in using an untick box in the UK and a pre-tick box in the States by relying on soft opt-in in the UK and no consent required in the States. We would ensure compliance, but still be able to get a significant uplift. It's the nuances within the rules, like the soft opt-in, implied consent, no consent required, and just being really dynamic that is seeing us get the uplift.
I think brand owners have enough to be worrying about instead of trying to remember the compliance rules of email opt-ins in every market that they're operating in as well.
Yeah,
So I think that
completely.
that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, and like we're not in it to scaremonger brands. Like there's lots of brands in the UK and Ireland that are using a pre-tick box, and the risk of being fined is pretty low. You might get a letter from the ICO asking you, warning you, saying, look, you're collecting non-compliantly. We'll give you a window of 28 days to change. But where we would see a pre-ticked or a non-compliant box tripping a brand up is when they're being acquired, and the acquirer goes into their CRM. Let's just say there's 100,000 emails in there, and they want to find out if they've been collected compliantly, and maybe a portion have through the newsletter pop up or through competition signups or influencers. But ultimately, if you've been collecting non-compliantly at the checkout, that's where we see it tripping brands up, because the acquirer wants to know if they can continue to market to those customers. If they've been collected non-compliantly, typically we see the acquirer hasn't. Then we've got to dive through and find out who's been collected compliantly, who hasn't. That is not a fun thing to do.
No.
And typically your CRM is going to take a haircut, and the valuation of the business is going to go down. So that's where we see it tripping brands up, not necessarily with actual fines. Where we're seeing the ICO dishing out fines will be continuing to market to customers that have unsubscribed. They really don't like that. But there's certain rules that they're not as strict on.
Very interesting. It's interesting just as a business in general, you've taken what was, I can remember when the whole GDPR thing dropped, was it 2018, 19?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What was, for the e-com industry as writ large, it was perceived to be a huge problem. And you guys have really turned that into an opportunity for brands to A, be fully compliant and the big changes that have come, but B, to really bolster that email marketing list that is just, so much more valuable today in the face of rising customer acquisition costs than it ever has been, to be honest with you. So I think it's a really clever piece of kit, really, that a lot of brands should be making sure that they have to really bolster that email marketing rate. Kind of brings me on to my next point there in terms of, I suppose, that marketing consent rate. It's something that I've heard you guys talk a little bit about at different bits of events here, there, and everywhere. But maybe for the purposes of our listeners here, it'd be great to just kind of get your own thoughts, feedback, and even explain what that marketing consent rate is.
Yeah, so it's a new terminology that we're trying to make a bit more topical. But effectively what it means is of all the customers passing through your website, what percentage of those are consenting to email and SMS marketing? So obviously the SMS part is only relevant if you're doing SMS marketing. So just solely focusing on email. That's where we're looking to track who is signing up to the newsletter pop-ups, who is signing up through the standard Shopify checkout. We do a 12-month look back to see what that pre-Dataships marketing consent rate was. And then what we're looking to do is increase that marketing consent rate. So Klaviyo still look after that pop-up and manage that, but we can track to see who is signing up through it. And then by presenting the most optimal wording at the checkout, we're looking to increase the number of customers. The nuances within that, like a large part of it comes down to customer behavior. Like if a customer has to tick 10 boxes to opt in for email marketing, what is the likelihood of them being able to be marketable? We need to make it as easy as possible for them. And especially when it's a paying customer that's invested in the brand already. The brand, like our client has spent so much money in driving this potential customer to the website, to then work your website, work them through your website, convert them into a paying customer. Great. But like the first purchase profitability now in e-commerce is really poor. You might make a margin of 20 or 30% on that. If you're lucky, you might even still be losing money on that first purchase. And if you can't email or SMS market to that customer, how are you going to drive them back to your site? You've got to go, through Meta ads, Google ads, try and, target them that way. The best way to get them back to your website is through email marketing. It's cost effective. You can be creative with it. You can segment really well. The offers can be specific to the person. And you can bolster that maybe with SMS, where you can be even more specific and the offer is even more compelling, even better open rates, even better click-through rates. So that in essence is what we're trying to do. And then the other key metric that we've kind of tried to make a bit more topical is return customer rate. So as opposed to repeat purchase rate or repeat purchase frequency, the reason why we brought in return customer rate is it's of the contacts that we've unlocked. We need to ensure that there's a value to those contacts that, some brands might have thought, look, they've been opted in through a bit of trickery here. Like that's not the case. They've been opted in because maybe it was slightly easier for them, but they're still invested in the brand. Ultimately, we want to see, are they coming back and repeat purchasing? And that's where we use the return customer rate. So of the unlocked contacts through Dataships, what percentage of them are coming back and purchasing again over a 12-month period? And that's something that we track closely across the 16 different segments that we have clients. And it's really interesting seeing, the likes of apparel and beauty are our best performers, all the way down to the likes of home and garden, toys, and would be less good performance because customers just don't come back and repeat purchase as frequently.
Is there, like you've mentioned, kind of 16 different segments there? We've touched on pet food being like a really high, an industry, I suppose, that depends on that repeat purchase rate and therefore might give an extra additional discount on first purchase to really bolster people into that email marketing newsletter. Is there, you've kind of touched on them there, but is there specific domains, like industries or even geographies where is your sweet spot, I suppose, from a Dataships perspective?
Yeah, like apparel and beauty are, my two favorite. Um, yeah, I've been called a beauty expert in Dataships because I love selling into the cosmetic brands. Because look, the reality is the stuff runs out quite quickly. There's always new products coming on. Yeah, there we go.
Being busy.
Yeah, it's just very, very dynamic. So, apparel as well. If people like a clothing brand, they'll typically continue to buy from that clothing brand. They mightn't shop around it as much as people might think. Whereas if a brand only has maybe one or two SKUs and it's a really high AOV, so it's a very considered purchase, the product might be very durable. That's not a particularly good fit because look, I'm not saying that they won't do email marketing. They might, and they might have some ancillary products, but that is not as good a fit. Um, yeah, so that's as regards geographies. If a brand is selling solely into Germany, that is not a good fit for Dataships because it's so strict that we're just ensuring compliance, and Shopify alone would allow you to do that. If a brand is selling a portion into Germany, then it's a really good fit because we can segment them away, ensure compliance, and then get significant growth. Our two best markets are still the UK and the US. Just as regards to e-commerce, it's where the majority of the stores are. Obviously, the States have the biggest majority of the biggest stores, and what is coupled with that is that the data privacy laws are particularly lenient, and they're not able to use the data privacy laws within the normal Shopify configuration.
Essentially, industries where the brand to survive needs to depend on really bolstering that LTV over time. And yeah, to your point, I mean, like we have a couple of even furniture brands on the StoreHero platform where, it's all about profitability on first purchase, because if you're buying a bed or a sofa, you're not buying three of them a year. It's a one-off purchase. So maybe that type of brand isn't as dependent on really bolstering LTV over, 12, 18-month window, where to your point, apparel, beauty, kind of pet food, those types of brands need to make sure that that email list is being filled with new contacts as much as possible. So no, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, like some of the numbers on that, like apparel, like if we unlock 1,000 contacts for an apparel brand, we'll see 730 repeat purchases from those 1,000 contacts over a 12-month period. Like it's crazy high.
Wow.
Beauty is 56%. So if we unlock 1,000 contacts over the course of a year, we'll see 560 repeat purchases. Toys is down at like 14%. So if we unlock 1,000 contacts, you're going to see 140 repeat purchases. So it's something that we've only started to do in the last kind of 3 or 4 months, is tracking the different segments and seeing what the return customer rate is. And then, we all know with e-commerce that, Q4 is the busiest time. So, yeah, just making sure that through those busy times you're capturing so you can then market to those customers for the remainder of the year.
That's insane. So you're telling me, like, potentially for a brand operating in Ireland or the UK, that standard, without Dataships on Shopify, you're looking at about a 22% opt-in rate at checkout. You guys can get that to about maybe 80%, 88%. And of the customer, of that additional amount of customers that you're getting on board, just take beauty for instance, you can stand over the numbers and say, on average, Dataships beauty customers, 73% of those customers are actually going to come back and shop with us again. That's a huge uplift from what the brand currently would have. And when we're talking about kind of bolstering that email list, but as a byproduct of that, really bolstering that LTV over time, it's a huge unlock. Massive, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. And I think, as the cost of acquiring new customers is becoming more expensive, the cost of ads is going up, cookie tracking is nothing as effective. We're seeing more and more brands going back to email. And look, SMS is the new kid on the block. We both know that SMS sends are considerably more expensive. But if you can get those two elements of your business right, it can be really impactful.
How have you guys seen the shift to SMS, or do you have any numbers on that in general? Yeah, it is definitely much more of an expensive platform, but I think one interesting thing about SMS is that if you're like me, you probably have 4 or 5 different email addresses for different things, but you only have one phone number. And I think the open rates on SMS are upwards of like 90%, whereas, a good email outreach is probably getting anywhere from 20 to 30%.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's what's appealing with SMS, because the open rates are really good. The click-through rates are also good. But with that, you also need to be really careful. Like if I'm getting an SMS from, a brand and it's for, fake tan or a bikini, I'm going to unsubscribe straight away. I'm going to be like, why? They've interrupted my day. They've sent me an offer that's not relevant to me. I'll actually be annoyed. Whereas if I get a message on a Friday, or a Thursday afternoon, go, Ian, look, sun's going to be out this weekend. Get your order in with, with O'Brien's wine, so you have your delivery for the weekend. I'm like, 20% discount, great. Click through, get it ordered. Right, I'm having a barbecue at the weekend, great. Like, and that works really well. Where we see brands tripping up is like treating email and SMS the same way, sending the same, the same messaging, the same frequency to the same people. That just simply doesn't work. It has to be treated very much as a different channel. I like brands that use SMS for their VIP customers, letting them know, look, there's going to be a drop coming up, or we're going to have this discount, but you're going to get the first access. I think that works really well, because then you're not necessarily sending thousands and thousands of SMS like you would email. And yeah, I do find the offer needs to be a bit more compelling on SMS. You might get away with a 10% discount on email. And I think it needs to be more convincing, more compelling to keep the customer coming back. And that's why it does get good conversion rates. But it depends on the brand, like how much of a discount can you give away. But yeah, it's definitely one to keep an eye on, but it's not as simple as, and we've seen this with the likes of like TikTok Shop and stuff. Yeah, it's the new kid on the block, shiny new thing. You can't do it, with one foot in it. You need to be fully committed and see it through over, the course of 6 to 12 months to really get the benefits of it.
I don't think you can use SMS as frequently as email either. Particularly for some of the brands that we would see, like you could be sending, 4 or 5 emails a week. I don't think you can do that for SMS.
No, certainly not. And you'll get that fatigue much quicker. And yeah, like we don't do the collection, but like WhatsApp is another one that's interesting. Brands collecting and maybe using WhatsApp for abandoned cart. WhatsApp is definitely more popular in Ireland and the UK, versus SMS is actually more popular in the States and Canada. For me personally, with SMS, I get maybe like a Ryanair or an Aer Lingus one, and maybe like a DPD will SMS me, but WhatsApp
pizza.
Yeah, that's it. WhatsApp is where the majority of mine are coming through. So yeah.
Yeah, no, same as that. No, that's really interesting. I suppose, what's the plans for Dataships? I suppose maybe even one before we go into that question. For a brand that I suppose is thinking about trying to bolster that email list ahead of, what is the busiest time of the year, and I suppose really trying to make sure that they're getting the most out of Black Friday in 2024, not just from an immediate sales perspective, but from a retention perspective. Is Dataships something that you put in the week before Black Friday, or should you be putting in that list? Should you be installing it now as a mechanism to just drive that increased list, I suppose, prior to Black Friday, and just make sure as you're going through that rush, at the end of the year that you're capturing as much additional data as possible to make 2025 as strong as possible.
Yeah, we are a good fit for the busiest time of year. Being honest, we're not really a solution that you would turn on and turn off at different times of the year. And just with the implementation is not overly complicated, but it's really to have a 12-month view. That's what we want, and we want brands to come away from, just trialing the shiny new thing. Like, if you want to take your capturing first party data seriously and you want to build it, consistently over time, compliantly, then Dataships is a good solution for you. At the same time, we know that Q4 is the busiest. Going to have a lot of brands are going to have probably 75% of their trade over the last 3-4 months of the year. Capturing the first party data of those while you're giving away big discounts, so you can then get them, at the turn of the year and the new year, paying full price is really, really important.
Yeah, no, completely agree. So many customers, I think, so many brands can just acquire, poor quality customers at peak time of year just because you're on these huge, huge discounts. So I think that's such an interesting point as well. Any plans from a Dataships perspective for the rest of the year or even going into 2025?
Yeah, so we're solely Shopify focused in the Shopify App Store, and we are only currently integrated with 𝗧𝗄𝗄. So it's a killer from a sales perspective if you're talking to someone who's on Shopify and they're using maybe 𝗃𝗏 or 𝗃𝗏𝗃 or Send. So we're in the process of building out the integrations with the likes of 𝗃𝗏, SendLane, 𝗃𝗏𝗃, 𝗃𝗏𝗄𝗏, just to give us a kind of broader range of people who we can sell to within Shopify, and then in time we'll look to build out a different platform itself. So looking at potentially Salesforce, the likes of WooCommerce, but yeah, initially it will be to service the other email and SMS providers, and then in time to build out the additional platforms.
Interesting. I wasn't actually aware if it was just 𝗧𝗄𝗄 you guys are operating with, or if you had some of the other platforms. Definitely seen a bit of a shift in that 𝗧𝗄𝗄 doesn't have the strong market dominance that maybe it would have had 2-3 years ago, that there is a lot more options on the market now today.
Yeah, like you're they're now listed, and look, 𝗧𝗄𝗄 do a really good job. It's a slick operation, and I really enjoy working directly. But it's expensive, and brands are feeling the squeeze at the moment. And you look at a solution like 𝗃𝗏𝗃, for example, and you can have your reviews, your loyalty, your SMS, your email all under the one house. That's appealing for brands. Now, I don't know 𝗃𝗏𝗃, well enough, and but maybe those 4 different ones aren't done as specifically well as maybe reviews on reviews.io, or 𝗧𝗄𝗄 itself on email, or 𝗃𝗏𝗃 on SMS. But it's really nice having them housed all under the one roof, and there's a lot to be said for that, and there's a lot to be said for the cost of it being. So yeah, it is an interesting one. Like SendLane are the new kids on the block. They're making moves in the market, but 𝗧𝗄𝗄 still have the big market share. MailChimp are making a bit of a comeback. It's an interesting space, and it's always going to be very competitive. And that's where we want to have ourselves covered, that we have those integrations built with the other providers.
100%. It's definitely an interesting space, and one we're keeping a close eye on ourselves here at the moment as well. You had quite an extensive rugby career, I suppose, even prior to Dataships as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I think you spent, was it 8 years at Leinster, a couple of years at Bordeaux, Bristol, and even Ulster as well. This isn't your first business either. You had another business, I suppose, that you were involved in prior to Dataships as well. Curious to understand, I suppose, the transition from rugby into business. It wasn't a clear-cut chop and change either. Like, you were involved in business while you were in rugby. Not sure where you got the time to do any of that, but it'd be interesting to kind of hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it was. So initially, I invested in Dataships. This is back, as you mentioned, even pre the GDPR business. We had a fantasy rugby business. So Mike is our CEO, Mike Storn, and invested in that with him. Built out this fantasy rugby game, had reasonable success with it. We'd over 100,000 people playing the game at the time. Saw a bit of a gap in the market in the sense that it was, the Irish Times was the main one that was there at the moment. We were seeing good success with fantasy sports in the States. Built out a more kind of stats-based game. It was good fun, and it wasn't making a whole lot of money. Ultimately sold it to Sky Sports, and
Class.
that then rolled us into the idea of the GDPR was coming out. Very much more kind of compliance focused business at the start, and then it's morphed into what Dataships is now. So I was working, obviously I was full time with the rugby, but I was still part time, maybe doing half a day a week at certain times or a day a week at certain times. And then as my career was coming to a close and I was playing less and less when I was at Ulster, I had more time, So if I wasn't picked on a certain week, you could work, a Wednesday afternoon, a Thursday afternoon, and a Friday afternoon, and a Saturday night. And I was able to get, a good understanding of the business. Myself and Sue Crowley had built out, the event side, making that a successful channel, the partnership side. And then it was figure what part of the business do I want to get in? It certainly wasn't on the development side, but I was I'm passionate about sales, and for me, not overly passionate about like data privacy rules themselves. Like I'm passionate about using those laws to our clients' advantage to be able to get them to market to more customers, drive more revenue. Because I've owned an e-commerce store in 𝗃𝗏𝗄𝗃, and I know how difficult it is, and there's enough hoops for these brands to jump through without having to worry about the likes of data privacy and those laws holding them back. But yeah, it's been a challenging transition. Like, what are we now? August 21st. So I'm only actually out 14 months.
Wow.
And yeah, I definitely thought I'd have more time than I actually have. First 6 months of the year, spread myself incredibly thin. Was just hanging on for dear life between Dataships and doing a bit of TV stuff. And yeah, I've kind of, like, one of the traps I fell into with rugby, like, it's, your schedule is laid out for you, and you have to obviously get up, and look, it is tough in the sense it's physically hard. You got to work really, really hard. You're pushing hard in the gym, you're pushing your body to the max on the pitch, trying to hit certain distances, certain spam. But it is very laid out for you. Like, even when you're traveling, like, you just have to follow your washing is done for you. Basic stuff. The food is put in front of you when you're hungry. Like, you come out of the gym, there's a protein, and that is great, but it probably doesn't prepare you for the real world. And my mindset was very much just wake up, work hard. The rest of the stuff will look after itself. And that actually doesn't work. It didn't work for me in Dataships initially, and it doesn't really work in business, because you got to have, you got to be able to plan your week and plan your month and plan your quarter, and be able to give projections and all that. And I really struggled with that. I just couldn't see past a week. And because you're cloned to do that in rugby, just focus on the game ahead of you. Don't be worried about who we're playing next week or the following week. Whereas in business, you actually need to be able to look around the corner and see what's coming. We've got peak time with Black Friday, Christmas. We need to get ahead of this. We need to have our offer sorted. We need to have our pipe full for quieter time, maybe January, February. And it's taken a bit of time and a bit of planning to get my head around that.
Has that been the biggest change? Because I even imagine more so at an earlier stage company, there's way more on your own shoulders from a planning perspective, from that ability to see around corners and just make sure you're prepared for what's coming in the next couple of months. Whereas, as you're mentioning, coming out of the gym, protein shakes there, your food is there, all of your travel is planned from you. They're two very opposite worlds to be living in.
Yeah, like, it's hard, when we were talking beforehand and you asked me that question, it's hard to pinpoint one thing. Like, another one is like just the sheer pace that things are done. Like, in professional sport, if Ulster are playing Leinster at the weekend and you need to get, your defense strategy, your attack strategy, your kick strategy all sorted. Like, if, for example, if you WhatsApp a coach, you'll have a message back within like a minute. If you WhatsApp another player, this exact same thing. Like, it has to be done, and it has to be done immediately. Otherwise, we're going to lose. That's the mindset. Whereas I just couldn't get my head around, why hasn't this person replied to my email?
It's been 5 minutes.
It's been 5 minutes. It's been 5 days. It's been 5 weeks. So yeah, I just, that definitely took it was humbling, and it definitely took a bit of getting used to that. Look, people are busy. You're not the most important thing anymore. Yeah, that was a big adjustment. And then I suppose the positive stuff from rugby, like, was, as an out half, I was very much on the strategy side. So you're trying to think of new plays, how you're going to break down the opposition, more from an attack point of view. And, I would have always had the belief of, look, be the first. So create the first draft, show the coach the first play, and then he can iterate off that. The first play is always the most difficult to create, and then anyone can make a few tweaks and make it look good. And most coaches will make it look like it's their own. And but it was bringing that into Dataships and going, look, let's try this marketing consent rate assessment. Let's try this in a billing deck. Let's try this messaging with our marketing. And being the first and not being critical of the first is a big part of our culture in Dataships. We don't criticize the first. We encourage people to be the first. And that's something that I've been kind of proud to drive within the company. And then my first draft typically gets heavily edited and then away we go.
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Perfect. Ian, if people are looking to get in contact with you, A, where can they find you? And B, where can they find Dataships?
Yeah, so I'm at Ian@dataships.io, or you can just go onto the website, dataships.io. If you wanted to email me and you want me to review your website, I can do up a marketing consent rate assessment where I'll be able to predict what your current marketing consent rate is, depending on your configuration, what we'd expect it to grow to. If you're happy to share your average order value and average order volume, I'll be able to predict out revenue that we could unlock. And then that's the main purpose of a free trial, to kind of confirm those predictions. And then we can do a 4-month view and a 12-month view.
So you guys have a free trial for new users as well?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we do a 14-day free trial. And yeah, we part of that is we do the look back so we can see the market consent rate pre-Dataships and then what we've increased it to, and then build out all the projections and all the fun stuff with that.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Listen, I'll drop all those links and notes below in the show notes here. But listen, Ian, just want to say thank you very, very much for coming on. Really, really enjoyed that and looking forward to catching up again soon.
Great. Yeah, really enjoyed that. Thanks for having me on. See you soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.